Welcome everyone. We at District Hall Venture Cafe Providence really enjoy partnering with Rhode Island Bio anytime we can. So I'm going to introduce Carol Malice, the Executive Director of Rhode Island Bio, Rhode Island's Life Sciences Trade Organization. We are very excited to partner with Carol, Rhode Island Bio, Driven, and I say this wrong, Rhode Island INBRI. Did I say that right? For their Rhode Island Innovator series. This series showcases innovators who have advanced their product or therapy from concept to clinical and commercial success. So take it away, Carol.
Thank you, Toonie. Always great to partner with you and the Venture Cafe and your team, Jordan, Amy, Jenna. Real pleasure to work with you. So again, my name is Carol Malice and I'm the Executive Director of Rhode Island Bio, which is Rhode Island's Life Sciences Trade Organization. We serve as the voice for Rhode Island for the life sciences industry, and we offer our members and the greater ecosystem access to resources, training, advisory services, and information sharing such as this morning's webinar. Today, we're excited to introduce our second innovator in our Innovator series, Bolden Therapeutics. Bolden is a biotechnology company developing first-in-class therapeutics to treat central nervous system diseases such as Alzheimer's, depression, and ischemic stroke. But before we get into our discussion this morning, I want to thank our sponsors who are Rhode Island Bio, Driven, and Rhode Island INBRI. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our partner and co-sponsor, Ed Harrett, the program coordinator with Advanced CTR, who's going to provide a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Carol. I wanted to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Carol and her Rhode Island Bio team for organizing this important series, the Rhode Island Innovator series. And then I want to acknowledge the partnership that we have between Brown University and URI with Bongsup Cho as the PI on the Rhode Island INBRI and his URI team of Laura Balavia and Laura Origi to help support this. I wanted to also mention that funding coming from this is, in support of this series, is coming from the Driven Award, where this is a Accelerator Hub Award from NIH, and it supports efforts to increase the number of medical entrepreneurs in the four regions of the United States. And the Driven Award covers the Northeast Consortium, and Driven is derived from the initials of the 5 states that are six states that are making up the 5 state idea states in the Northeast. The lead organization is Celdera Medical, and Julie Coleman is the project lead on that, and Jake Rader is the PI. Wanted to call out that we have that they organized a renewal submission, and so we're looking forward to continued funding, hopefully in the future. And if that is funded, we'll have additional pilot funding for medical entrepreneurs. Wanted to call out Advanced CTR for helping advertise the Rhode Island Innovator series and biomedical entrepreneurship activities. Jim Padbury, of course, is the PI, and we've partnered recently with NEMIC and the New England Medical Innovation Center on their planning pitch deck and immersion program. And 2 of the assistant professors who participated in that program will be giving a seminar at noontime today. And I'll put that link in the chat in case anyone wants to participate. And those are recorded so that you can look at those in the future. So I'm really excited about today's program. At this point, I'll continue with the program. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Ed. Always great to work with you and everyone at Rhode Island INBRI and Driven, and looking forward to next year and all the work we're going to continue to do together. So now, before we get started, just a few meeting logistics. We will have a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can save them to the end when we have a chance to talk with the team at Bolden and ask questions. So right now, I'd like to introduce Johnny Page, the founding CEO of Bolden Therapeutics, who will introduce the team at Bolden.
Thanks so much, Carol, and thank you, Ed, and thanks to everybody tuning in today. Kind of cliche, but it really does take a village, Driven Bio, RI Bio, Embry, Venture Cafe, so many people to thank. So thanks for having us here. We're really excited to share our work. So a little bit about Bolden. So Bolden was incorporated in November of 2019, so a little over a year ago at this point. And our mission is to develop therapeutics to promote the creation of new neurons in the adult brain. This process is termed neurogenesis, and you will hear that word many times today. So Bolden scientific founders, Ashley Webb and Justin Fallon, professors at Brown, who you'll hear from shortly, they've discovered a novel signaling pathway that can be manipulated to promote the creation of these new neurons. This is important because animal work has shown that neurogenesis is important for learning and memory. And both animal work and clinical data have demonstrated that neurogenesis is important in disease. And so neurogenesis has recently emerged as a target for neurodegenerative diseases and other neurological conditions, with our primary focus at this time being Alzheimer's disease. We have key validation data that's demonstrated that when you manipulate this pathway, we can increase the creation of these new neurons and also promote improved memory as well. Bolden has the exclusive rights on this intellectual property that was initially developed at Brown. We were recently awarded, actually about a year ago, awarded a $500,000 foundation grant to develop drug candidates and test them in mouse models to see if we can increase neurogenesis and cognition in Alzheimer's disease mice. And we've been working hard over the past year to try to procure various resources to support our development efforts. And we have recently been awarded a lab space at no cost to us, with further information on that forthcoming. And as of right now, we're currently raising seed funding to further the company's mission. So a little bit about me, and then I'll turn it over to Justin and the rest of the team to introduce themselves. I went to Brown as an undergrad. I started in 2013. I received degrees in music and neuroscience. In the senior year of undergrad, I began doing research in Justin Fallon's lab. And I was very excited by the work that I was doing and decided to stay on and pursue a master's degree in biotechnology in Justin's lab as well. I completed my master's in 2019. And right about the time when I was presenting my thesis, which is related to the work we're going to be discussing today, there were kind of a convergence of papers that demonstrated and really kind of hammered home the fact that the work that we're going to describe to you has translational relevance and might be helpful in treating disease. And so when I graduated, we were all, Justin, Ashley, and I were having a lot of conversation about, this approach's potential and trying to figure out the best way to bring it forward. And we ultimately decided that we were best equipped to bring this work forward. And so we decided to form Bolden, which was founded in November of 2019. And I've been the CEO since. So Justin?
Right. So again, thank you all very much for being here. And I'm a professor of neuroscience at Brown. I work in cellular molecular neurobiology, and my laboratory has always had a very strong interest in understanding and revealing basic science that can lead to new therapeutic avenues for devastating neurological diseases. That's what we're really about. And as Johnny alluded to, we have had such a development really in advance, and it's incredibly exciting because Johnny will talk to you more about it, but our primary goal here is Alzheimer's disease. And this is the scourge of our biomedical world, our personal worlds. Every one of us is touched by Alzheimer's, everyone. And it will continue to be a problem. And we don't have the tools, we don't have the therapies. And what motivated Bolden was the recognition that we have a new way to go about developing therapeutics for Alzheimer's disease and other neurological diseases as well. And that energized and motivates us every day in what we do. And we'll talk about who we are and what we do, but I think it's always worth, why do you do what you do? And that's why we do what we do. And that's where I'm here. Okay, Ashley?
Great. Thanks, Justin, and thanks everyone, and Carol for setting this up. So I'm Ashley Webb. I'm an assistant professor in the MCB department at Brown. And the focus of my lab is on understanding the molecular mechanisms of aging. And we are particularly interested in brain aging and neurodegeneration and understanding the mechanisms that are involved and how we can actually tackle neurodegeneration therapeutically. And when I started my lab, I actually did not plan to start a company. I just wanted to start there. So for those of you who might be getting, into this area, the entrepreneurial space, it's okay if that wasn't necessarily in your plans from the beginning. So when I started my lab, my focus was really on basic research, and we received funds for work on neurogenesis and mechanisms of aging, including from the Rhode Island INBRE program, which really helped to get us started. And as we go through this conversation, we'll talk more about how this team came together. But when I initially started, my work was really focused on basic research. But when I started working with Justin and Johnny, I started, realizing that that there is actually a disease application here, and to not go after that would really be a missed opportunity. And so I've been very fortunate, I think, to work with Justin and Johnny and to expand the team. And I'm really excited about what Bolden is doing, because I really think that we have a great opportunity to make a difference in this important space of Alzheimer's disease. So Charlie, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Charlie Polsky. I'm the executive board chair. By training, I was studied math in college and then went to medical school and completed my residency in general medicine at the University of Chicago. But I've spent the better part of the last 20 years on the investment side, first investing in public biotech and healthcare companies, and then in private ones, and then actually starting some and serving on the board. So I've had a long-standing relationship with Justin, and we spoke about a year ago, and he described some of his work and Bolden getting started. And what drew me to this program from the investment side was the combination of, number one, tackling an important unmet need in Alzheimer's and other associated diseases of the brain. Number two, I thought the foundational science was very interesting. Number three, I like the people a lot, and given that I have the luxury of getting to choose who I work with, I strongly prefer to work with people that I feel are intellectually honest and also collaborate well, and everybody checks the box there. I saw somebody put into the chat box a question about the intellectual property from the investment side. This is also important to me if I'm going to be part of a project. And Bolden has an exclusive license to the underlying IP, and with new and additional IP to be filed. So, the company appealed to me on a number of levels. I'm very happy to be involved. And I think this is very exciting. And so I'll turn it over to Sudhir, who's on our scientific advisory board.
Thanks, Charlie. It's good to be with you all. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sudhir Agarwal. I'm serving as a member of the scientific advisory board of Bolden. And my relationship with Justin go back to almost 20 plus years when we were at a research institute in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. I'm a scientist by training. I've have a dual track record as a scientist as well as an entrepreneur. As a scientist, we have been interested in working on RNA therapeutics, which is a new platform. And only in last 5 years, number of drugs based on these platform has been now approved. Published over 300 papers, authored 400 patents plus, and have edited 4 books. On the entrepreneur side, I'm a founder of Idea Pharmaceuticals, and until 2017, I served as a CEO and chairman of the company. And since then, I've been at UMass Medical School as a visiting professor of medicine. So in really building this company, in my past companies, it has been, very compelling science, bringing the right-minded people together, and then doing what we call killer experiments to take it to forward, and then thinking about that each invention does have applications in humans, and how to move that to quickly to humans, so that way we can find out if it does work and help patients. So it's good to be working with Bolden team. Johnny?
Thank you. Carol, so I think that's the end of our introductions. Would you mind starting with the questions?
Sure. So I think it's great to meet everyone on the team. So we had some nice comments about the collaboration that's going on the team. So can you, I don't think we'll get to the science, but I don't think we ever talk about on these webinars, how do people actually work together, particularly since we're all virtual right now, we're all working remotely. How do you actually work on your science together?
It's a great question. It's certainly been an interesting time to start a company. We founded in November of 2019, so we've spent the vast majority of our company's existence in the midst of this pandemic, and so very grateful for platforms like Zoom and other video conferencing, because we can stay in touch. In terms of getting experiments done, obviously a lot of that has to be done in lab space, and there are challenges with the pandemic, of course, with staffing and occupancy and testing and all sorts of logistical challenges. So I would say that if we had not been in a pandemic, we might have been able to move a little bit faster. But that being said, it has also afforded us the time to really reflect on our program and to really put the pieces together, so that I feel like now we have a very clear picture of where we want to go and where it's headed, and what the steps are to get there. And it's almost, I don't know if this is fair, but I'm just thinking now, like perhaps if there had not been a pandemic, we would have been a lot more, we would be moving more, maybe more quickly, but maybe not as, well, it's not fair to say not as thoughtfully, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, by having this downtime, we've had the chance to reflect on the program, spend more time identifying, what the key experiments are and how we're going to get there. Other thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's important. I think it's also, Carol, your broader question of how does the company come together at all? And then the secondary question of how does it work in a pandemic? And I think it's worthwhile, a little anecdote of how this whole idea came about. And this came about at a live event about 3 years ago, where a retreat for molecular cell biology, where Ashley is a faculty member and I was there in the audience. And Ashley gave this incredibly interesting talk, and about neurogenesis, which is these forming new neurons, making new neurons in the brain, right? There are stem cells in the brain. Can you stimulate them to make new neurons, more neurons from those stem cells that are already there? And great problem. And so Ashley gave this talk, and then what you couldn't do in Zoom, I could have listened to the talk on Zoom, but then I said, let's have lunch. So immediately, like from the symposium room outside to the barbecue, we sat and had lunch, and different members of our lab were there, and we hatched this idea and said, yeah, there's something here. And from that, we applied for a grant from the Office of Vice President of Research at Brown, a seed grant, which was absolutely essential. And that came through, and we were able to do the experiments. I think that, you need a team. The core scientific, and then Johnny came in and to do really important experiments. It's shared commitment that's really important. As Charlie said, it's, mutual respect. It's getting the elements. And you can see this in the who's here. I mean, Sudhir is a world leader in RNA therapeutics and antisense, truly a pioneer from the very beginning. And, Charlie, a businessman and an investor, but also a physician. And to have the elements, and then the science, and then the leadership, and the CEO that Johnny's providing, I think that all these elements need to come together and to go forward. We've been able to do that. Yeah, it's been somewhat pushy. You're always pushing a boulder uphill when you have a company, but the boulder's a little bigger and a little slipperier, more slippery when you're in the middle of a pandemic. But we've been able to succeed in that. Really important. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Well, I would also just add the element of serendipity, that these are chance encounters, some of them. The fact that Justin happened to be at the symposium, the fact that I got involved because I was talking to Justin about something else. And so maybe it's a hackneyed sentiment, but networking is so important, and touching base with your social contacts and your professional network. And I try to make an effort in general, if I haven't spoken to somebody that I find interesting, and just periodically to reach out and ask, hey, what are you up to? What's going on? And oftentimes it's these fertile, conversations that yield the unexpected coming together, which is, I think, definitely the case here. And so, especially for those in the audience who are thinking about entrepreneurship, very rarely do things fall into your lap. And so those who are out hunting and foraging are more likely to come across opportunities. And so some of it is luck, some of it is work, and some of it is constantly just staying in the mix and getting out there and seeing what's going on. And that applies to listening into webinars like this, or you see that there's a featured speaker at your university and going to the trouble of listening, and going to the trouble of showing up. And so, this is definitely a situation where a lot of things came together, but what's buried in there somewhere is there was a lot of work and people reaching out, and that's what led to the successful mix, I think.
So let's talk a little bit about the science now. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Alzheimer's treatment landscape and what's different about Bolden's approach to it?
Sure, I'll start with that. So as Justin said, Alzheimer's disease is something that has affected all of us, whether it's a family member or a close friend. My family, as my grandparents, have been affected by it, and it's incredibly challenging, not only for the patients but also for their caregivers and others involved in their care. So, it's a tremendous unmet need. It robs people of their memories and of their personalities, and it's really tough to experience, and it's tough to watch as well. And so, unfortunately, the treatment landscape for Alzheimer's disease right now is not very good. There are two classes of medicines that have been approved for Alzheimer's, known as acetylcholinesterase inhibitors and NMDA receptor blockers. The brand names are Aricept and Namenda, and sometimes in combination as well. And these drugs, if they're given early in the time course of disease, they can sometimes provide symptomatic benefit. However, it does not have any effect on the underlying course of disease, and it does not slow the progression of the disease. So usually as patients progress with Alzheimer's, these drugs stop having any effect. And so, it's tough right now. I mean, the kind of best practice guidelines that most patients will take those medicines, but they don't help everyone. And if they do help patients, they often don't help for very long. Now, in terms of what's been going up the pike, so almost all therapeutic development efforts so far have been centered around a protein called amyloid. And this has been known for, over 100 years when Alzheimer's disease was first characterized by Dr. Alzheimer, that patients with AD have plaques in their brain. And it's kind of the most obvious pathology that one can observe if you look at a brain of somebody with Alzheimer's disease. However, unfortunately, all efforts to date targeting amyloid alone for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease have been unsuccessful. And so that has really opened up the therapeutic landscape. People are now interested in exploring alternative approaches. And one of the reasons that we're excited about neurogenesis as an approach is that, what we're doing is we're promoting an endogenous process that occurs in all of our brains. And it is sort of distinct from, the pathology of amyloid, but they're not mutually exclusive. So if you had a therapy that could reduce pathology in some way, and you could combine it with an approach that enhanced neurogenesis, you may see an additive effect and have an improved clinical course with patients. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Justin and Ashley to talk more about neurogenesis.
Ashley?
Sure, yeah, I can start. Thanks, Johnny. So as Justin already mentioned, neurogenesis is the process by which new neurons form from precursor cells. And so this is how your brain develops, right? This is how new neurons develop early on in life. And for a long time, it was thought that that was just a developmental process. But as it turns out, there's actually quite a bit of neurogenesis or new neuron formation that's going on in the adult brain, as well as the aged brain even. And it's going on in particular areas. And it just so happens that one of those areas is the hippocampus, and specifically the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus. And this is one of the earliest and most affected regions in Alzheimer's disease. And there's now strong data in humans showing that early on in Alzheimer's disease, there is a decline in new neuron formation. Yet we also know from animal studies, as well as some work in humans, that stem cells are still present in these Alzheimer's brains, and they can actually be stimulated to enhance cognition, to form new neurons and enhance cognition. So they can actually take advantage of the circuitry that's already there, form the new neurons, which can help to maintain learning and memory functions. And so that's the process of neurogenesis that we are trying to tap into, and our data suggests that we can tap into that process in order to enhance cognition, at least in animal models so far. And so the idea here is that in Alzheimer's disease, neurodegeneration is the loss of neurons. And so what we're trying to do is replenish those very neurons that are lost in this really important region of the brain that's supporting cognition in the adult. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that, Justin?
No, it's beautifully said. I think that, again, just to underscore, this is something that happens anyway. We're not, taking, we're leveraging a innate property of the brain and then boosting it. And we're doing that by accessing a very specific set of signals that controls whether or not these stem cells make new neurons. That's what we've accessed. That was the talk that Ashley gave back at that retreat, was about what those signals are. And then we realized we had another half of this story that we knew how to actually manipulate that in a very specific way. And that hence was the scientific foundation of Bolden. So it is a very attractive target. And as Johnny said, unfortunately, the amyloid hypothesis and the therapies, and this has been many, Biogen and Lilly and Genentech and others have tried various drugs over the years, the decades, to target amyloid, and they just have been marginal at best. So the field needs fresh mechanisms and fresh pathways and targets, and that's the excitement. That's why we're excited about Bolden.
So Justin, you mentioned those other companies. We have a question in the chat. Please identify from Jeffrey Fallon. Please identify other companies working on similar therapeutics and assess where Bolden is vis-a-vis their competitors. So would you consider those your competitors, or who else would be considered a competitor?
No, that's an important question. So in the Alzheimer's space, Alzheimer's from a company corporate perspective is the single biggest market out there in terms of a single entity. And I mean, cancer is very big, but there are many, many different kinds of cancer. Alzheimer's is Alzheimer's. And it also is a completely unmet need. You know, there are many things we can do for cancer. There's more we need to do. For Alzheimer's, extraordinarily little. Okay, so then the question becomes, though, so many of the companies I mentioned went to the amyloid hypothesis, and some have done another pathology called tau. Unfortunately, also has not yielded benefit. In neurogenesis, it's very fresh, very new. There's nobody out there doing neurogenesis therapeutics. There's one peripheral, a private company, but I think it's it's a complex drug. But I think that in terms of targeting neurogenesis specifically, no, that's one of the remarkable things about it, is that the competitive landscape is very open right now. That's important.
And
So
just
I
to
would
piggyback
imagine
on
that you, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead. Who is that?
No, I was just going to make the additional point from a clinical perspective, that I think most people agree Alzheimer's is not a disease that's going to be treated with one drug or one approach. I think that it's a disease that's so difficult and intractable that likely down the road there'll be several different complementary approaches, and so even addressing neurogenesis is but one leg of a many-legged stool, and no one company or one drug is going to solve this. But what that means is that even if there are other Alzheimer's companies doing good things, it's something that we should all be excited about rather than fearing the competition.
Sudhir, could you give us your perspective on that?
I think Charlie has said it's a multifactorial disease. As different pathways are being elucidated, it's possible that this will be a combination approaches. As Justin said, neurogenesis has been a completely new path to treating Alzheimer's. And pinpointing to the targets, that becomes very important in neurogenesis, how to activate this process, and the molecular mechanisms which have been elucidated by both Ashley and Justin are the key, and that's the IP which Bolden has.
I want to welcome Steve Salloway, who's on our call. Steve, are you unmuted, and would you like to say a few words?
Well, thanks so much. I hadn't planned. I'm glad to be able to join in. I hadn't planned on it, but and I hadn't planned to speak. But well, listen, Alzheimer's is a huge problem, as everybody in this call knows. We've been working on this in our program and around the world, and many of you probably have as well, for 30 years. I disagree a little bit that no drugs are effective. We now have 2 drugs that have shown a clinical benefit that attack a key component of the disease. So we're getting a little bit of traction, and we'll see what the FDA does with aducanumab. It would be very exciting to have, we haven't had a new treatment for 17 years, and I think this would be a very positive signal of opening the field. But I totally agree with Johnny and Ashley and Justin that the field is wide open right now, and it's going to require more than one treatment. And depending on the patient phenotype that we will target combination therapy. I think neurogenesis is really exciting. What Bolden's trying to do is terrific. And, just have to go through the science and see, where it leads. But that, I think many different targets are very, very important. And some we know now and can imagine, and some we have not yet imagined and are to be discovered. So I think this is part of that story. So thank you so much for asking me to comment.
Thank you for being with us. So,
Carol, I just jump in 1 second.
sure.
So Steve, thank you. One of the things, as Steve spoke, when we were very early on pre-Bolden, I went to Butler and I said, Steve, I have an idea here. And what do you think? And it was an incredible conversation, because to talk with a clinician, a world leading clinician and researcher in Alzheimer's early on sort of said, this is where we need to go, right? And when you have any idea about a therapeutic or where is it going to go, you want to stretch out there to say, okay, this is what it's going to look like from the people who are actually going to prescribe these drugs and treat these patients and see what the problem is. So personally, and also in terms of structurally, Steve has been, amazingly important here. So I'm very grateful.
Well, just two other things I'll pitch in is one is certainly at Brown, we're building our initiative in Alzheimer's therapeutics and Alzheimer's-based research. And so we're very, very supportive of initiatives like Bolden and what they're doing. And the other is a big challenge is getting from the laboratory, from the animal model, where there is some promising data, to people and showing that it really works in people. And it has the biologic effect, and it has the even more challenging, the clinical effect. And that's a really important hurdle to get over, because many things have looked good in the lab that haven't panned out yet in people, and that's really critical.
We have a question from Margaret Levin. Is this a drug or treatment that stimulates neurogenesis? Is it targeted, or is it a cell-based transplant?
Yeah, so it's not a transplant. We are targeting the cells that are already there, and that's an approach that we're really excited about. And that's exactly what we wanted to do, because we think that's the safest way to increase neurogenesis, because we're doing it in a region where it's already happening, and we can increase it safely. Great question.
So just a general question. With all of the world focused on vaccine development and some of the rapid resources and procedures now to get things moving more quickly, how will that affect your field? Do you think that it's going to push your research faster? What are your thoughts about that?
Sudhir?
I think based on what you're seeing, certainly, based on the science developed to date, within a year, we have vaccines developed for COVID, which is remarkable progress. And so that shows that the basic science has to continue in all areas. And if you look at the investment coming into biotech and pharma over the last 1 year has been much more than previous years. And so I think investment community is realizing that continued investment in the basic science is needed for developing new medicines.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And I'm sorry, Carl.
Go ahead.
The other thing, we haven't actually mentioned this explicitly. The leading therapeutic candidate that Bolden is developing is a so-called antisense oligonucleotide, which was invented in many places. Sudhir has many, many patents on. And your question is, antisense oligonucleotides target RNA. This is an RNA drug, basically, is what it is. And the reason why those vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer and BioNTech were so fast is because it was very, very highly targeted, and it was developed how you can make them, how you can deliver them. This is known for antisense. So it is once we're there, and we need to do this heavy lifting over the coming years, Sudhir says, but when the go signal happens, we'll go very fast because of all of the knowledge we have about this class of drugs. And I think that the the vaccines are an example of that. Yes, to be sure. Thanks.
I think just to add what Justin said, so this is as Ashley also said, that this is a drug targeted to a molecular mechanism. And so we are taking multiple approaches, which would be targeting RNA or protein. But then each one has its own advantages and disadvantages because of the time taken. But as Justin said, antisense approach targets the genetic imprint of the pathway we are targeting, and the speed of its development could be very fast. We're not talking years, it could be only a year or two. And so we are very focused in advancing the program coming up to a drug candidate.
That's very exciting. We have a question from Jim Padbury. What's the general signaling pathway without breaching any proprietary information? Who wants to take that?
You know, it is an important question. I just have to say it is proprietary right now. And so we have filed our intellectual property on this, our patents on it. But we have not yet publicly disclosed what this pathway is.
Thank you. He says thank you too. Related to your work, are there other diseases that you're also interested to test?
Yeah, I mean, there are actually quite a few that we're interested to test. And one of the benefits potentially of neurogenesis as a target is that, as Ashley described, this is an endogenous process that's ongoing in our brains, and it has a role in memory and cognition and a number of other things. So there are several neurodegenerative diseases and neurological conditions where animal research has been conducted, and it has underscored the importance of neurogenesis as, you know, as the deficit in neurogenesis as a pathological feature of the disease. And it's kind of wide ranging. I mean, it includes, you know, things like Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, other forms of dementia, depression. We know that neurogenesis is incredibly important in recovery following ischemic stroke. There's also evidence that neurogenesis may be, a deficit in neurogenesis may be part of what's colloquially known as chemo brain. Following cancer therapy, a lot of patients experience, you know, kind of a loss of memory, and there's evidence showing that neurogenesis may be involved in that process as well. So I'd say there are tons of things that we want to test, and our goal really for this year is to show the necessary proof of concept data in Alzheimer's disease so that we can get enough support to thoroughly investigate all of the potential ways that this approach could be useful.
So related to that, we have a question from Ravi Ramanathan. Would you rate this as the best shot we have at Alzheimer's currently, given almost all previous trials have been negative? What are the odds you will give for this to succeed? And he said, we all hope that it does.
I'll take this one, mostly because Ravi, you know, this is early stage drug development, and it's very hard to handicap the success of any one company, any one drug trial. And you need to understand that for any preclinical program, there are a number of hurdles to clear along the way prior to getting FDA approval. And it's almost impossible at the outset to take two different drugs and know which one has a better chance of success. And I think it would verge on being irresponsible for us to give you a percentage expectation that this works. So with all of those caveats, those of us involved in the project are excited by the foundational science. We see that the data that's been generated thus far give us hope for further success. The strategies that we're pursuing along the way make good sense to all of us, and we understand the path forward. But early stage biotech investing and early stage drug development are they're high stakes challenges, and it would be oversimplifying, I think, to try and give you a number or say that this is beyond a doubt the best approach.
Yeah, he has a part two to that. More technically, because the time frame for the development of Alzheimer's compared to any targeted therapies like antisense operating with short time frames, how is this timescale problem tackled?
I mean, I can comment on that, because I think here we're sort of touching on the mechanism by which we can stimulate neurogenesis. And in fact, the person asking the question is absolutely right that these are relatively short treatments. But in this case, that's actually potentially an advantage, I think, because if we can actually stimulate the mechanism and then allow the cells to continue on their path down neurogenesis and maturation and integration in the hippocampus, then that should be sufficient to increase cognition. And our animal data will address this question directly, the time frame question. But the therapy that we are developing may actually be sort of perfect in the sense that 1 or 2 treatments could actually increase cognition and help treat the disease. It's a great question.
Thank you. I think this question is from Margaret Levin. It might be a question for Steve Salloway. Butler is one of the sites of the Pointer study, Exercise and Diet for Alzheimer's. Isn't exercise postulated to promote neurogenesis, and are there any plans for collaboration there?
Well, that's a good question. We are a site for the Pointer trial. Exercise, we think, is beneficial to the brain in terms of nerve growth factors and vascular function in the brain. It would be great if it stimulated neurogenesis. I'm not sure the data is clear cut on that. That would be fantastic. I don't think there's any, formal collaboration right now, because Bolden is in early stages of this development of this strategy. But I think the opportunity for collaboration is high. And my view, actually, about lifestyle, so I think there's sort of 2 buckets in terms of approaching Alzheimer's disease. One that applies to all of us. So hopefully, we're all of us, in general, are going to be living longer, and we want to preserve our brain health for as long as possible, hopefully for the whole ride if we can. And things that we can do, like vigorous exercise, starting early and maintaining that throughout life, and diet and brain stimulation and heart health and so forth, make a lot of sense, and that it will decrease the rate there is a modifiable component to dementia and cognitive impairment, or to brain health. And I think there's something we can all do. Some of us are at higher risk of Alzheimer's, or on a trajectory that will lead to Alzheimer's, with greater degrees of certainty, depending on what your risks are. And for those individuals, we're going to need more than a healthy lifestyle. We're going to need to change the biology of the trajectory, in addition to what we can do through good health habits, good lifestyle habits. And so that's where, neurogenesis and many other strategies come into play. And some people, and so I see the combination of the 2, especially for people at higher risk, that healthy lifestyle plus whatever biological interventions to modify the risk are really important. And there is a worldwide finger movement, it's called, because originally the Pointer trial grew out of the finger study in Finland. And now there are 35 countries, at least 5 continents are participating. And so I think the goal, I'm on the leadership. I'm certainly not the leader of that, but I'm, able to participate in this movement. But I know the leadership of that movement really envisions that there will be combination treatments. There will be biologic treatments plus lifestyle treatments that go together to maximize the impact against the disease. So yes, there's plenty of opportunity for collaboration as the program unfolds.
Thank you. We have so many great questions coming in. I'm just going to keep going with those because these are so interesting. So we have one from Bangsup Cho. Just curious, what kind of chemical modifications are in place for Bolden's antisense drugs?
Sudhir, do you want to speak to that?
So I think majority of the work in this field has come from our labs. And so we have those modifications. Some of these modifications are in public domain. So we are incorporating them into antisense drugs of Bolden. But we are also continuing to improve further upon of these modifications. So currently they are proprietary sequences and modifications, but we are incorporating what's the most important ones.
We have so many coming in. I'm going to keep my eye on those. But while I'm doing that, Johnny, what are some of the key milestones that you have planned for 2021?
Yeah, so I think I'd say a general statement is that we're really trying to bring this work forward. And thank you, by the way, Steve, for coming in and sharing with everyone your expertise. Our goal is that these efforts, may have an effect on human disease and reduce suffering and improve quality of life for the patients and the caregivers. That's really what drives us every day. And in order to achieve those goals, I'd say that Bolden's primary focus is to continue to, test the compounds that we have in hand and identify a lead compound, and then generate proof of concept data in disease models of mice that have, Alzheimer's disease and other diseases to demonstrate that, the viability of this approach. With that data in hand, I really think that if the results are positive and if the data is compelling, I really think that would be a springboard to have a very a significant ramp up of our facilities, of our team, of our resources to further identify exactly how this may help. So I'd say our main focus right now is to generate more data and to figure out whether whether our lead candidates can improve neurogenesis and cognition in the diseased animals.
I would
Does
just
anyone
add,
else want to add? Go ahead, Charlie.
well, just that what goes hand in glove with the scientific discovery and advancement is, of course, the funding of the company. And we've been very fortunate to have generated some buzz, and particularly with the data that we have in hand. So we're currently raising a round to help finance the discovery that Johnny's talking about. And so far that seems to be going very well. So we feel very fortunate in that regard.
For those people who are sending in your questions, if I don't get to your questions, we're going to give you Johnny's email at the end of this session so that you can ask him directly. But we do have one from Brendan McCory that I'd like to address because everyone wants to know the answer to this question, which is, how is the Rhode Island environment for starting a biotech company?
Well, I'm happy to start that, and then other team members can chime in. As I said at the beginning of the call, the Rhode Island community is very tight knit, and there's a lot of benefits to that. As an early stage company, we've been afforded the opportunity to, have events like this today, to speak with, leaders in the field and other, government officials and all sorts of people within the Rhode Island community as a small company, which, other early stage companies may not receive the same amount of attention, say, if you were in Cambridge, for example, because there are tons of them. And so we've been very lucky in that regard. I would also say that, all of the academic institutions within Rhode Island, is a tremendous, and the hospital systems, and there's a lot of experts, both in basic science, translational science, and clinical work. And so we've been really fortunate that these resources are available, and that in general, by and large, most people are very willing to speak and to contribute to our knowledge. So that's been great.
Anyone else want to comment on that? What's it been like to start a company in Rhode Island?
Well, I would like to add the comment that over many years, I've worked with a number of different academic research centers trying to sublicense intellectual property discovered at a university into a private company. And this doesn't speak to all of Rhode Island, but in my experience with Brown, they've been so cooperative, collegial, and very pro-business. And I can't thank David Potter enough and that group. They really want to see us succeed. And so I would say if others within the state of Rhode Island have that same attitude, it promotes business development very well. And I have been involved in other projects with other institutions where it's been problematic and extremely difficult to extract intellectual IP from universities and sublicense. So I think from my perspective, Rhode Island is a great place to start a biotech company.
Well, I think we have just 2 to 3 minutes now to wrap up. And I'm so delighted that we've had so many questions. We need to do this again, everybody, because obviously there's a lot of interest and this is very important work and we're all excited for what you're doing. But can you give us, each of you, just give us some parting thoughts? What are your hopes for the future? What would you like to leave us with today?
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead, Justin.
Sorry. Having been still an academic and started now 2 companies, when you start a company, you don't know what you're doing. Just be aware of that, right? And what you have to do, as I said, is reach out and make connections and find the right pieces, but don't be stopped by not knowing what to do. Just keep reaching out, take your science, go forward. And it's a lot of work, but don't think that you're not gonna have everything. Just keep pushing.
Yeah, I would echo that. And to the young scientists out there, I would just say, be bold, be brave, be smart, and work hard. And you can make it happen. And as Justin mentioned, and as we've heard throughout this call, Rhode Island is a great place where you can gain access to all of the resources and the help that you need to get started. And so don't be shy about reaching out.
I think just to add that the key is the data. So as you continue to generate the data, keep on telling that story and continue to broaden your horizon and bringing the like-minded people together, because as people see the data, they come together and help in your mission.
That's crucial. And just one more point, that couldn't be more important, the data. And the data, we're currently funded by foundation grants, and we had this incredibly important seed fund. The seed funding around is so important because most of these really important things are pre-NIH. And Rhode Island does have programs for this, and it's absolutely critical to draw on those.
And I guess a couple of words from me. I was not expecting to be where I am today, in terms of being the CEO of Bolden, and the opportunity presented itself. And it was almost, I was compelled to try to further this work because I really feel that it could have an impact on this unmet need. So like Justin said, you may not know what you're doing when you're starting out. And I think one of the important lessons for me is, just how important having good advisors and mentors can be. So I'm very fortunate to have the team that we have and to be able to learn from them.
We get everybody? Charlie, did you give some last words there?
Well, my colleagues are so talented and smart. It's hard for me to think of something useful that they haven't already said. But I would say don't be bashful about reaching out to people that you trust, to your own mentor group, especially at the outset. It's very hard to have competencies across all the areas that you would want them to start a company. But rather than making your own mistakes, maybe you can learn from other people's mistakes. And the best way to do that is to identify people with experience in the area you want to pursue and ask them for advice.
Thank you. Well, we are now at noon, and so I want to thank everyone who participated in today's webinar. Thank you all. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to Driven, Rhode Island INBRE Bio for being our sponsors. All of the team at Bolden, we definitely want to have you back. Maybe in another 6 months, we'll see where you are. But thank you to all of you for helping us launch this series and for your great work. It's very, very important work and will make a huge difference in our world, a huge impact. So we're all behind you and supporting you, and we want to promote whatever you're doing through our Rhode Island Bio Network. And for all of you on the call who are not Rhode Island Bio members, please join us. Just go to our website, www.ri-bio.org. You can become a member there and partake of more webinars and other resources like we have today. So thank you all. Be safe, be well, and that's all for today. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.